Now, there's no doubt that the behavioral shifts of the last 10 months will leave a permanent imprint on the retail landscape. In the US alone, some 20 to 25,000 stores are likely to shut this year, which is more than double the number that closed in 2019. Macy's, Zara, JCPenney, John Lewis, Isetan are amongst those to have announced closures around the world. And just this week, two venerable fashion retailers here in the UK fell victim to the crisis too. Arcadia Group, which owns Topshop, fell into administration, the UK's version of Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. And Debenhams, the mid-range department store, is shutting down altogether, eliminating more than 12,000 retail jobs. One exception to the rule, however, is China, where next year, physical retail is actually expected to grow by up to 5%. But the pandemic is weighing on our customers' minds as well, as reported in the State of Fashion 2021. Over 20% of US consumers expect the crisis to affect their personal or household finances for more than a year, and 34% say they'll trade down to less expensive items to save money. But we remain confident that this isn't the death knell for physical retail. Rather, it's a moment of intense transformation in the retail landscape. Just have a look around you. As I reflected on in the video, as you just saw, new concepts and service-focused retailers are already opening. And to shed some light on these new retail archetypes, I'm pleased to welcome one of our Voices alumni and the host of our recent podcast series, Retail Reborn, Doug Stevens, to give us a preview from his upcoming book, due out next year. Consider this the sequel to Doug's popular talk at Voices 2017, only delivered in a way that had to adapt to the COVID-19 era. As you'll see, his insights are as valuable as ever.
Hi there, everyone. It's fantastic to be with you. And I just want to send a thanks out right off the top to Imran and the entire team at Business of Fashion for having me as part of today's event. You know, it seems almost inconceivable to me now that about 11 months ago, myself and 37,000 of my colleagues from around the retail industry converged on the Jacob Javits Center in New York City for the annual pilgrimage known as the National Retail Federation Show, or the Big Show as it's known in the retail industry. And little did any of us know at that time that the entire global retail industry was about to be rocked by a meteor strike known as COVID-19. And that only a matter of weeks after we gathered in that center, the Jacob Javits Center itself was turned into an Army Corps of Engineers field hospital to deal with an overflow of patients suffering from COVID-19 in the New York City area. But what I want to focus with you on today is the longer term, because I think there's a huge risk in a crisis like this of becoming very myopic, becoming very focused in the moment, in the news cycle today, or in business developments today. And what we can lose sight of is the horizon, the deeper changes that are taking place under the surface that can sideswipe us coming out of this crisis. And while some people see COVID-19 as an accelerator of trends that were already in process, I see it very differently. I believe that COVID-19 has not only accelerated the future of retail, I believe that it has altered it entirely. And I say that because our lives are not a reflection of retail. Life is not a reflection of how we shop. How we shop is a reflection of life. And in order to understand the future of retail, we need to understand how this crisis has fundamentally changed our lives. Hundreds of millions of us are now working from home on a regular basis, and there's every indication that this is going to become common practice at a growing percentage of companies. We're educating from home, which has surfaced significant opportunities to rethink the education system and the technologies that support remote learning. Cities around the world are experiencing outbound migrations leading to a profound redistribution of population and wealth, and the very nature of cities, too, is being rethought. This, of course, impacts transportation systems and models, all built to accommodate a daily influx of workers in and out of cities, thus impacting the retail that's been built along those transportation routes. And finally, even the social and professional experiences that we are having are being reshaped moving us closer to quality interactions and effective levels of productivity via technology. And none of this should come as a surprise because, frankly, if you go and you stand on the corner in any major city in the world and you look around, 99% of what you're looking at was created in the industrial era for an industrialized world. None of it was created for the digital era. And so I see COVID-19 not as a mere accelerator. I see it as a threshold, a unique wormhole in time where society as a whole is being pulled out of the industrial era and across the threshold of the digital age. Now, for many companies, that's been a terribly difficult transition. But for these companies, Amazon, Alibaba, JD.com, and Walmart, this has been like a 10-month steroid drip. When we emerge from this crisis, these brands are going to be infinitely stronger and more far-reaching into the lives of consumers, leading us to what I call the end of the beginning of e-commerce. And I say that because as we speak today, about $3 trillion worth of the global retail economy is transacted online. But the opportunity that still remains is $27 trillion worth of retail activity. And so as these companies now begin to consider how they continue this inordinate level of growth that they've experienced through the pandemic, it's my belief that they're going to start attacking that remaining $27 trillion worth of retail economy. But they're not going to do it simply by selling us more of what we're familiar with, more subscriptions, more electronics, more household goods, more apparel. No, my belief is they are going to start to attack categories that are both vulnerable to disruption and promise exponential returns in the form of revenue and profitability. Categories like banking, insurance, education, shipping, and healthcare. And when you start to explore the tentacles that these companies have already put into these categories, it's absolutely stunning. For example, if you look only at Amazon's activity in the field of healthcare, over the last 3 years, the company has launched 9 major initiatives aimed at disrupting the category, culminating only a couple of weeks ago with the announcement that Amazon was starting an online pharmacy. Just on the announcement alone, the stock of CVS and Walgreens tanked. And so it is completely conceivable that in the years following the pandemic, Amazon will not simply be shipping groceries and apparel items to your home. They may be your child's tutor. They may be your savings, your checking account, your credit card. They may be your healthcare provider. In fact, they may hold the insurance policy on your home and your automobile. And when that happens, these companies are going to transform from being large international retail enterprises to becoming more like utility companies that power every aspect of a consumer's life. They will evolve from being competitors to becoming apex predators. And I say that not as a pejorative. What I mean is that they will have achieved the highest possible level of their own evolution. They will have no natural enemies apart from themselves. And the danger, of course, in that, not just for retailers, but for all businesses, is that it puts Amazon in a position where it will no longer be reliant on its product marketplaces for revenue and profitability. In fact, it can use products and services to draw consumers into its life ecosystem. And that in turn will spark a chain reaction where large national retailers now begin to adopt and build out third-party marketplaces just in an effort to compete with these apex predators. And that will require that every other business in the market revisit its fundamental core positioning. But I don't mean positioning in the traditional sense. Traditionally, we've thought of positioning from the standpoint of luxury versus discount or convenience versus experiential. That's not what I'm talking about. Instead, I'd like you to think about it this way. In the post-pandemic retail era, purpose will be the new positioning. And by purpose, I don't mean your corporate vision, your values, your mission statement. All that is fine, but it's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is this. If your brand is the answer to a question, then what is that question? What is the one question that you and your brand alone is the ultimate answer to for a consumer? I'll give you an example. Why is it you think that we buy Nike products? Is it that we're simply buying decent looking apparel that's well designed and relatively affordable? Is that what we're doing? See, I don't think so. I believe when we buy Nike products, we're buying stories. Stories about justice and equality, stories about perseverance and challenge, and stories about pushing through failure to reach success. When we buy Nike products, we're buying a cultural point of view. And Nike answers a very specific consumer question. The question, of course, is who inspires me? And so, what we've created at Retail Profit are 10 retail archetypes that we believe are going to define the future of retail. 10 archetypal business models that we believe are going to remain resilient, profitable, and vital in that future. And in that framework, Nike is the storyteller. Other brands may take a totally different approach, and we find a great example in Patagonia. Patagonia, of course, has a rich heritage of environmental activism, from the design of their stores, the attention to carbon footprint of their physical assets, all the way through to their appeals to customers to reuse, repair, or resell their products. Patagonia, too, answers a very clear and important consumer question. That question being, which retailer aligns with my values? And that makes Patagonia an activist brand, a brand that appeals to a consumer's sense of cause. And that's a very different proposition than you would find at Camp. Camp is a New York City-based retailer that many people look at and say, this is the toy store that Toys R Us should have been. The irony in that is that only about 20 to 25% of Camp's revenue actually comes from toys. Because beyond the 1,500 square foot toy store experience at the front of the space, and behind a secret door sits an 8,500 square foot black box theater of experiences for children and their families that changes all the time, with the bulk of Camp's revenue coming from live events, memberships, and other online experiences. And where Toys R Us answered the question, where can I buy a toy? Camp answers the broader question, where can my child and I go to have fun? Within our framework, that makes Camp an artist brand. An artist brand is that which takes unremarkable products, but creates such a beautiful theatrical experience around those products that it draws consumers in. In other cases, we may be looking purely for expertise as a consumer, and that calls to mind a brand like Hodinki. Now, Hodinki is a brand in the wristwatch market. I happen to be a bit of a collector of wristwatches. And so the story with Hodinki is that in 2008, Ben Clymer, who was working in the financial services sector in New York City, decided that he was going to leave the financial world and he was going to go deep into the category of wristwatches. And he had been given a wristwatch by his grandfather when he was very young, and that sort of started his passion. So with that, he began researching and writing and editorializing about the wristwatch market. Well, one thing led to another. His following grew. He hired more bloggers, more videographers, more podcasters, and eventually built out a significant media network around wristwatches. But he had to make a decision. He came to a point where he had to decide, are we going to continue down the editorial route with advertising as the chief form of revenue, or is there a better way? And with that, he decided to open up a watch marketplace for both new and vintage watches. The bottom line is you can barely get your hands on anything that Hodinki posts to their site. And in some cases, we're talking about watches that are tens of thousands of dollars and they sell out almost immediately. Why? Because Ben Clymer has created through Hodinki an authoritative voice that people trust implicitly. And like all of our other archetypes, Hodinki answers a very clear question for consumers. That being, where can I go to get the absolute best advice in this category? And in our construct, that makes Hodinki an oracle brand, a brand that essentially represents the high watermark for knowledge and expertise in their category, a beacon to consumers who are looking for credible information. In some cases, it's really just about the product itself. It's about the design of the product. Companies like Apple, Dyson, Away, and Tesla have carved out reputations for remarkable product design. And they too answer a very simple but important question. and that is, where can I find the best designed product? And as an archetype, that makes these brands engineer brands, brands that focus meticulously on the nuances of design and aesthetics and functionality of their products. And sometimes we're simply looking for something different. In 2012, Ernie Garcia III was attending a wholesale car auction in Phoenix when a remarkably simple idea hit him, an idea that would change an entire industry. Why, he wondered, couldn't consumers just buy cars the same way that dealers do at auction, using a comprehensive spec sheet and then making go or no-go decisions about which cars to buy in a matter of seconds and then confidently plunking down their cash? With that, he created Carvana, a company that completely reinvented the experience of buying a car, using technology to replace the dealer experience. It's also worth noting that Carvana is now not only one of the fastest growing and largest startups in history, it is also the second largest dealership of automobiles in the United States. And Carvana, like every other archetype, answers a very clear question, that being, who has a better way of buying this product? And in this construct, that makes Carvana and brands like Carvana renegade brands, brands that come into a market with a distinctly different or better way of buying that product, brands that change the price value proposition in their category, and in doing so, disrupt the incumbents in that category. Now, when you step back and look at these 10 archetypes, you'll notice something. You'll notice that they're broken into 4 quadrants: culture, entertainment, expertise, and product. In the post-pandemic era, it's going to be essential that every company, regardless of category, establish a dominant archetypal position in one of these quadrants. The next question, of course, is how do you bring these archetypes to life? How do you bring them to life in such a way that you can fight back against these apex predator brands? And the way I'd like you to think about it is this. In the post-pandemic era, your store, your physical assets are going to become a media channel. And your media is in essence going to become the store. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is this. Every form of media now that the consumer has exposure to is no longer simply a call out to go to the store. Every form of media must be the store. It must give the consumer the ability to purchase in that moment of inspiration. We also have the means of building in elements of customer service, be it through chatbots or live streaming. We have the technologies to allow customers to try things, to experience things before they buy. And we can make every form of media within that customer's reach fully immersive, engaging, and shoppable. And so while most brands will never be able to compete with apex predators in terms of building out these massive life ecosystems, what they can do is build a robust media ecosystem that feeds opportunities to consumers to engage, to interact, and ultimately to buy. And if we do all this properly, it becomes a self-fulfilling system of engagement where the experiences in our physical stores become content that we can then push online in a shoppable way. And that shoppable content then drives consumers back to our stores for more experiences. And all of it, of course, connected by technology. And finally, I just want to leave you with one thought, and that is this. This is indeed a very strange and difficult time for many of us, both personally and professionally. But I want you to think about something else. The 1918 pandemic and the Spanish flu, for all of its disaster, and it was, 50 million people died worldwide, but it led to something else. It led to the Roaring '20s, a time of amazing prosperity, innovation, and productivity. And I have every confidence that if we as an industry can really dig deep, can become creative, can revisit our fundamental purpose and our positioning, deliver new value to consumers, and create remarkable experiences across all of the channels we sell in, that we too can experience our own version of the Roaring '20s, that being the Roaring 2020s. Thank you very much for your time.